Hey, everybody, welcome back to Living the Spiral, or if it's your first time listening, welcome here. This is a podcast where we track the great turnings moving through the sky, through our bodies, and through the collective field. And this week, we're talking about the year of the Fire Horse, the Lunar New Year, the solar eclipse in Gate 30 in Aquarius that's happening on the same day as the Lunar New Year on Tuesday, February 17th. And then a few days afterwards, on February 20th, we're going to have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries at 0 degrees of Aries in Human Design Gate 25. So we're going to look at all of these big occurrences that are converging here, in addition to the Lunar New Year and the solar eclipse in Aquarius on the same day. It's also Mardi Gras, Fat Tuesday, on that same day, the 17th, as well as the first day of Ramadan. And so there's a lot of convergences culturally, a lot of cosmic convergences that are happening this upcoming week. And so stay tuned to dive into these a little bit. We'll focus mostly on the astrological and human design and gene keys manifestations of these energies, as well as the Lunar New Year. I've always enjoyed celebrating the Lunar New Year. I lived in China in 2006 for the full year, and I arrived there in late January, right as everyone was getting prepared for Lunar New Year. And I didn't quite know what to expect. I was living in Suzhou, near a couple hours from Shanghai. It's called the Venice of the East, a beautiful city with lots of canals. And it was just an incredible experience to witness the migration of people for the spring festival that Lunar New Year begins, and then it's a 2-week holiday of celebrating the welcoming of the new year, and so many firecrackers, and not so many visual fireworks, but at that time it was just nonstop loud fireworks and firecrackers. And I just remember being very aware that I was in a new place, somewhere that I hadn't experienced before. And ever since then, it's been 20 years now, I guess, and I've definitely celebrated and paid attention to the year and the element that we're in. And we are beginning this Lunar New Year of the Fire Horse, leaving behind the wood snake, which 2025 into 2026 was the year of the wood snake. And so there's a major shift in the energetic qualities of these animals as well as these elements. Wood in the whooshing cycle, in the 5-element or 5-phase cycle of Taoism, is representative of upward growth, kind of like a sprout or a tree growing upward. It's a spring type energy. And fire is a summer type energy. Fire is what happens to wood after it grows. It must burn down to become earth. So we're in the heat of the fire horse. And then, the difference between a snake and a horse are palpable. The transition there feels very relevant in the sense of the snake was an animal that was moving with its belly on the ground, kind of being alert to the pulses of what was happening beneath the surface. And now, as we transition into the fire horse on Tuesday, it will be a big change in energy. Horses are a little bit more energetic creatures, able to run off to distant horizons and rear up and also be trained and have a strong relationship with humanity. So this is definitely a moment that is resetting the rhythm of the year. I do feel like this Lunar New Year is the true beginning of the year. And at the same time, it is an eclipse. It is a solar eclipse where the sun and the moon are in the same part of the sky. And so we are experiencing a bit of a surrendering quality. I would say some new moons are all about manifestation. Most new moons that aren't eclipses are about manifesting new energies. And eclipses are a little bit different in the sense that they are times when the harmonics of the sun, moon, and earth are so precise and so exact, creating this eclipse that it's a good time to surrender to the universal happenings and not try to impose too much of your conscious will. And we'll talk a little bit more about eclipses in general. There's lots of different beliefs about what eclipses signify depending on the culture, but I'll talk a little bit about my perspective on eclipses, and then we'll get into the specific gates and signs where this eclipse is happening on Tuesday, where this Lunar New Year is starting. And I do think it's a really important day to pay attention to because similar to the Aries 0 degree point, the Aries ingress, a lot of astrologers cast a chart every year on spring equinox on the Aries 0 degree point for the year ahead, kind of casting a birth chart for the year that gives implications and significations about what the entire year might have in store. Similarly, the Lunar New Year is a good time to cast a chart for the upcoming year to kind of just get a sense of what energies we're working with as we enter this Lunar New Year. So it's kind of a recalibration of life that we're starting right now here, a moment where the body clock of our culture is shifting and there's a new tempo emerging. So thanks for being here. Settle in with a cup of tea or cacao if you like, or just feel free to let these perspectives wash over you. As I said before, this Lunar New Year is coinciding with an eclipse, and that eclipse is activating human design gate 30, which is known as the gate of feelings, or the gate of passion. And then we do have that Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries at that 0 degree point of Aries through gate 25, which is the gate of innocence or the gate of universal love. And so we have some really potent energies relating to the heart, relating to feelings, relating to emotions, relating to how we use the fire within our hearts for better or for worse. And that'll be a big theme of this Lunar New Year up ahead. When a Lunar New Year coincides with an eclipse, which does happen quite frequently because the Lunar New Year is always on a new moon, and a solar eclipse is also always a new moon. So eclipses kind of intensify and deepen that threshold moment of the new year. Lunar New Year's already carry the symbolism of renewal and initiation. And an eclipse layered onto that moment is really suggesting that the year isn't just simply beginning, but reorienting, something kind of being removed from view and something new being put into view. I like to think of eclipses as times when, like you're in a room and the light is shut off for a moment, the darkening of the sky. And then when the light comes back on, the furniture's rearranged a little bit. Maybe things, there's some papers out of place. Things aren't exactly where they were before. And you're starting to notice things in a different way because of that dimming of the light and the re-illumination. Even if it's just a subtle shift that happens when that light is dimmed, your eyes have, adjusted, your pupils have expanded when the light dims and let more light in. And then when the lights do come back on, you have more of an open eye, an open awareness of what you are now paying attention to. And so I really feel like eclipses are important times in the year. I am not afraid of eclipses. There are definitely times when things can happen a bit suddenly. It can seem sudden because you're having a new perspective shift based on that dilation of your pupils, I would say. But there are times when there's almost a universal ordering that comes into play. And eclipses are common. They happen a couple of times a year. We have 2 to 3 eclipse seasons per year where 2 eclipses, a lunar and a solar, happen at the same time within a couple of weeks. And so this eclipse season starts with this solar eclipse in Aquarius on the Lunar New Year. And then there will be a lunar eclipse in Virgo 2 weeks later. And that will kind of cap off the end of the Lunar New Year celebrations. So we have a full eclipse season that is encapsulating this Lunar New Year spring festival holiday in the East. And eclipses, to start off the Lunar New Year, they're not regular new or full moons. They're interruptions in the usual flow of light, moments when visibility drops and the unconscious, the global awareness takes the lead. And in astrology, eclipses correspond with fated realignments and sudden revelations, and sometimes the closing or opening of karmic storylines that are something's needing to shift within those storylines, that you can't just keep going on status quo. Eclipses provide an opportunity to shift awareness in that way. And eclipses tend to work kind of like crabs, like sideways rather than in a linear fashion. You don't always see what eclipses are gonna do and how they're gonna affect your life while they're happening, but you feel the shift in the days and weeks and months after between the eclipse cycles. And so something moves out of alignment and something else comes in to take its place during eclipse times. I really just always like to highlight how beautiful it is that eclipses really show us that there's this miraculous measurement where the Earth, Sun, and Moon are aligned so perfectly. With a solar eclipse like this one, the Moon is passing between the Earth and the Sun. So the Moon and the Sun are in the same part of the sky, the same part of the zodiac, or the same gate in the human design mandala. And that moon passing between the Earth and Sun casts a small shadow on the Earth during the day. And the lunar eclipse that we'll have in 2 weeks from that will happen when the Earth passes between the Sun and the Moon and casts a large shadow over the full moon. And I just think it's such a beautiful time to really appreciate the beauty of the mathematics and the sacred geometry of the sun, moon, and earth relationship during eclipse seasons. It's such a coincidence in some ways, or maybe it's divine, that the sun is 400 times wider, but also 400 times further away from the moon. And they both have an angular diameter of about 0.5 degrees, which allows for total solar eclipses to happen. And so to me, just taking a moment to pause and think about the beauty of that geometry, the beauty of the fact that there is this perfect alignment between our moon here on Earth, this rock that is orbiting us, and the sun. And for me, that really plays into the significance of eclipses being these times of surrender to the larger cosmic flow, rather than having to put our own manifestation, our own intention into what we want to see happen. It's a time to really just sit back and pay attention to the fact that the universe might have some larger paths in store, have a greater story in store for us than we even know. And so this eclipse happening on the new year, the Lunar New Year, is about attuning to the field where the year will be lived, not asking us to set big intentions at this time. I think that lines up with the fire horse quite nicely, in the sense that if you think of a fire horse, I think of a wild stallion that is not tame and is not going to take you on a trail ride necessarily that you have planned out. But if you get on that horse, it's time to surrender a little bit and trust that your relationship with the horse, your relationship with the element of fire, will help decide where to go. It's less about your control and your intention, but more about the alignment with that relationship. And so this is pretty initiatory astrology that we're stepping into here. If you've been listening for a while or paying attention to other astrologers out there in the field, you'll know that February 2026 is a major initiation point, where January certainly wasn't a slow month. Plenty is happening all the time and has been happening since the beginning of the year. But there is something about the alignments of these celestial movements that are happening in February that really is going to feel like a bit of a click in to this new energy that we're already feeling. So today we'll explore what the fire horse sets in motion and how this eclipse in the Gate of Feelings is going to shape the emotional and evolutionary collective body. And also tune in a little bit to what Saturn and Neptune meeting in Aries and the Gate of Innocence is asking of our spiritual integrity and how we can move through this personally with presence rather than overwhelm. So let's start out with the year of the Fire Horse. The Fire Horse is an archetype that's long been associated with volatility and courage and rapid movement in the Chinese calendrical system. The horse itself represents life force in motion. The horse is instinctual and embodied, forward driven. It's definitely very dissimilar to the snake in the sense that it's not really contemplative energy. It's not as thoughtful or as slow moving. It doesn't check consensus with everyone else that's in the room. It's kind of the type of energy that moves forward on its own. And horse energy does remind me of Aries energy, that fresh sparks of energy, that kind of catalyst for new beginnings. And the element fire, there are 5 elements in the Chinese zodiac system that are related to the whooshing cycle, which I talk about quite frequently in this podcast. And fire is the element that is of burning energy that will intensify the horse life force motion by adding visibility and speed and exposure. So, fire horse energy tends to surface what has been suppressed and accelerate what's been waiting for an opening. So, we've been in a year of contemplation, and in the Tarot, 2025 was the year of the Hermit. So, we were in a Hermit wood snake year. And in the Tarot 2026, numerologically, is the year of the Wheel of Fortune or the Magician, depending on how you add it up. And both the Wheel of Fortune and Magician have that energy of creating something out of nothing, the spark of new beginnings. Whereas the last year has been more about setting our own internal path, holding that light, like on the Hermit card. You're holding that lantern ahead of you as you walk through the darkness. And so snake hermit energy had a similarity, where the snake and the hermit were both about inward reflections and contemplations. And now we move into action. Creativity, cultural shifts that will happen when we seize the momentum. This is the type of year with the Fire Horse where when we attempt to restrain the vitality that wants to come through, it could backfire. We have to, again, just grab the reins and go, is really what I'm hearing and picking up from the field, is that we've been in a bit of a holding pattern, a slow moving waiting pattern, and now it's time to go and run towards the next horizon. The last Fire Horse year was 19. And I've read a few articles about how that year was very significant in China and Japan specifically, because there's a longstanding mythic reputation of the fire horse in these countries, where fire horse children, especially fire horse girls, were thought to be too strong-willed and kind of too disruptive for traditional social structures. And so whether that is actually the truth, there was a cultural belief that a fire horse child would be too wild, essentially. And so in 1966, birth rates dropped sharply that year in China and Japan. And you can see it in the demographic records. There's a sharp decrease of children being born in that year. One article I read was a woman who was born in the year of the fire horse in China and had immigrated to the United States, and said that she was very happy to be a fire horse despite the kind of cultural implications and stereotypes. She said that these times that we're living in now are much more accepting and uplifting of fire horse energy. The ability to make something happen that might not be holding the status quo. Spiritual warriorship is something that seems to also be reflected in the year of the fire horse as well, with a certain momentum, a certain warriorship that comes from within, the ability to build those relationships with something that is very free-spirited and wild. And to me, that feels like a really beautiful invitation. So as I record this, we are still in the end of the wood snake, the hermit wood snake. And I have heard a lot of people speaking lately about this desire to rush into fire horse energy without giving the full closure and the full completion for the shedding of the wood snake. And I agree with that. If you're listening to this before Tuesday the 17th, I would say don't rush into fire horse energy yet. Take the time to acknowledge everything that the snake has done for you, everything that low to the ground, pulsating, slithering kind of energy has brought forth in your world. Because the year of the fire horse will definitely take off into the sunset and not look back. And so as the snake is shedding its final skin, it's down to the tail there where the skin has been slowly shed off the full body, and now there's kind of this spiralic movement, really trying to get that final bit of the skin off of the tail. That's where we are. And so to provide some reverence and to pay some reverence to that snake energy and to everything that has come forth from that is really important. And then, I think for me, I'm definitely feeling the shift, almost like waiting for the other shoe to drop kind of energy. I've heard that phrase come up a lot lately in spaces where I've been, where everybody's kind of just waiting for what's coming next. And that feels appropriate as we lead up to the Lunar New Year. It feels like the type of energy that we should be in. And there can be a bit of anxiety that comes with that, for sure. We can feel like, because of the unknowing of what it is that's going to happen, or the new energy, how it's going to feel, we can live in a state of kind of holding our breaths. And so I would recommend, as we're moving through this threshold from the snake into the horse, and from wood into fire, and also from the end of Pisces, the end of Saturn in Pisces, into Saturn and Neptune coming together in Aries, all of these have a very similar symbolic energetic shift, going from a more watery, more flowing energy to a more catalytic and spark-like energy. So I'd say remembering to breathe as we move through any transition, taking the time to feel deep breaths, diaphragmatic breaths that fill your belly with air, that fill your side ribs with air, slowing down your exhale and really allowing the huge calibration that is happening in these shifts to settle into your body, rather than either holding our breaths waiting for something, or jumping the gun and getting out of breath, jumping ahead into the year of the fire horse. So over the course of this next week, deep breaths, deep and slow breathing would be something super helpful. And then as we settle into the fire horse year, and it's not very subtle energy, it's catalytic energy, I would say that there's a few things that we can do to work with its tempo. One of them is not leaning in to the urgency, finding a pace and a rhythm. Horses definitely have a rhythmic quality to their movements. And so rather than feeling the urgency of the moment, knowing that if we find a rhythm at the beginning of the year, we can maintain that rhythm through the year. And just know that not everything that moves quickly is meant to be chased. And also notice the difference between aliveness and adrenaline. You can feel that spark of aliveness in your body without getting overrun by something that's burning faster than it can be sustained. I would also say this year is a good year to build a vessel for your desire. We are starting this year in the Gate of Desire. The Gate of Feelings is also known as the Gate of Desire. And so this is definitely a year that will amplify our desires and our longings. And that kind of free floating desire without any containment can be very exhausting in that adrenaline type of way as well. So creating a structure around your desires, a bit of a schedule with your meals, with your sleep rhythms, with your physical movement and exercise, a certain rhythm and pacing, again, here is important to contain what it is that you want to accomplish, because it is a year where it's going to be pretty easy for things to kind of spiral out a little bit. So it's about bringing them back to the heart center and bringing them back to the hearth. And I'd say it's also another really good time for the year of the fire horse to choose fewer commitments, but truer commitments. and try not to scatter your energy everywhere, but notice what the things are that are truly calling you. Again, I keep referring to the horizon because I just think of horses running off towards the horizon. And I think that we can't chase multiple horizons at the same time. So, looking at that beautiful sunset or sunrise, or which direction is it that you want to go, and choosing that as a path for commitment, and then finding that rhythm to get you there. And then finally, protecting your nervous system, because the collective field is definitely sure to have volatility continuing through the course of the year, where intensity of emotions that play off of each other can circulate very quickly. And so I would say grounding practices, continuing that breath beyond the threshold, creating an infrastructure of somatics and embodiment exercises where you can ground into the earth as we enter a lot of fire and air energy, spending time in water, taking Epsom salt baths, putting your feet on the ground. This type of thing just isn't really a luxury during this time, where we really need that more yin grounding energy to balance out the yang fire and air energy that is approaching and going to be in the collective field. And yeah, that's pretty much what I would say about the Fire Horse year. There's definitely, I'd say, creativity is another beautiful thing to bring into your field for this fire horse. There's a lot of energy with fire and horse, and it needs somewhere to go. And so sometimes a deep breath or barefoot walk outside doesn't quite do it. And so I think figuring out ways, whether it's a certain type of more energetic exercise or whether it's a type of creativity that involves your hands, and actually creating something out of nothing, is a good way to move that energy through for the year of the fire horse. So moving on to this Aquarius eclipse in Gate 30 that's launching off the year of the fire horse. Gate 30 is a really interesting and potent gate in the human design mandala. It is known as clinging fire in the traditional I Ching, also known as Li. And the two trigrams that make up the hexagram for Gate 30 are fire over fire. So whenever we have a double trigram, I feel like it's very potent energy. And the fact that the fire horse year is also starting on an eclipse in fire over fire is really just showing us in a very strong way that fire is the element that we're working with. So since it is still winter-ish, leading into spring where I am, I've been making a lot of fires in my fireplace and got a little fire pit for my backyard as well. And just contemplating the nature of fire. If you have accessibility to making a campfire or a fire in your fireplace, and to not only appreciate the warmth, but to appreciate the movement and the flexibility and the beautiful change that is encapsulated in a fire. I think that a lot of beautiful epiphanies and beautiful revelations can come through looking into a fire. And I recommend doing that as we enter this year that is very heavily emphasizing fire as element. Fire is something that, in this case, clinging fire, tells us that fire can't exist independently. Fire will go out if it has nothing to cling to. Fire is something that reveals the inner workings of whatever it touches, but it is also itself shaped by the quality of the fuel that is being given to it. And so when you have fuel that is distorted or fuel that is made up of some elements that are not necessarily familiar, the fire can burn erratically. But when the fuel is sound, the fire can turn into a hearth that illuminates. And so there's a relationality with fire, that it requires something to cling to and something to burn, and the quality of what is being burned is very important as far as how sustainable that fire will be and what type of energy it will create. And so this fire over fire energy is about transformation through the element of fire. It's about not burning something down, but really revealing what is underneath. When fire can take wood and it can transform it into a carbon-rich ash that can sustain and nurture the soil for new life to grow. So fire is a very important part of the cycle of life and the cycle of plants on this planet. And so I think that paying attention to fire during this season is definitely an element I'm noticing as I speak. It's an element that I have a interesting relationship. I love fire. I think it's incredibly beautiful and incredibly powerful. But I also was in a house fire and lived through a house fire about 15 years ago that still sticks with me in my nervous system about how scary fire can feel as well. How it is something that when it starts going, it's not easy to stop it. And so the idea of containment, the idea of creating a hearth for the fire before this new year occurs, before we are jumping right into the mix, I'd say that creating that infrastructure of routines in your life, of grounding in your life, of creative practices in your life, it's a very good time to do that because fire creates warmth, fire creates light, fire creates a mystical divination tool for looking into the worlds beyond worlds. And I think it's an incredible force and also can get out of control. And that's something that I know very close to my heart. That's something that's very, very present in my body is that awareness of how fire can start to feel like it's too much or it's overwhelming. Thinking about our desires in the same way. Desire is the one of the words that's associated with Gate 30, this fire over fire energy. And it too, like physical fire, can get out of control, right? When we have desires that we wish something was a certain way or we want so badly for something to be how it isn't, it can become hunger. It can become this insatiable hunger for something. And it can lead to suffering, having an unbridled desire that doesn't have a place for containment. And so that desire is the shadow frequency in the gene keys of Gate 30. And it really talks about how we don't need to eliminate desire from our lives, but it's just about refining our relationship to desire in the same way that we learn how to control fire, not by putting it out, but rather creating a container for it to thrive and be its own wild self, but within limits, within a nice stone hearth or something of that nature. The energy of the new moon and the sun and the moon coming together on this Lunar New Year is starting with contemplations about desire, about how we can trust our desires to lead us in the right direction, but also not give in to them to the point that they lead to suffering. And then in the gene keys, the gift level is lightness. So it moves from desire that is all encompassing to a lightness of being, which also speaks to fire. It speaks to the beauty that is created by a torch. We're humans living in darkness and discovered how to harness fire and put it onto a torch or into a lamp or a candle. The beauty that can come from what is illuminated in the darkness through that lightness. And the city, the highest frequency level of Gate 30's energy is known as rapture. And I'll speak to these a little bit because I do think it's important contemplation right now as we experience this eclipse. In the Gene Keys, Richard Rudd, the author, says, when we talk about lightness in respect to this 30th gift, we are not talking about escaping life by making light of life. On the contrary, we are talking about entering more deeply into life suffering than ever before. We're talking about a kind of suicidal tendency that simply holds up its hands and says to creation, okay, I give in, do your worst. What is actually committing suicide is your distrust in life, or what some traditions label the ego. You have to come to a deep realization of your own mortality and weakness in order to realize the true strength lies in simply trusting. Life is having its game through you, and you are simply a genetic pawn in that game. You have to become utterly helpless. It's not that you become helpless in a victim sense, but that you realize you are beyond needing help. And then the magic happens. You discover you can enter into that expanded state of consciousness that is guiding the overall game. This gives you access to a higher level of functioning, and you realize it was simply your distrust all along that was making your life seem so difficult. So that passage is very interesting. To become helpless, but not in a victimless sense, to realize that you're beyond needing help, really feels like it lines up with what I was talking about with eclipses in general. That attunement to the alignment of the sun, moon, and earth, or the attunement to the alignment of universal energies, the biggest, the game that life is having through you. And rather than trying to fight it or control that in the way that we can't put a box around flames, it's more living in the sense of being a part of that larger higher level functioning and trusting in the fact that it's going to be okay. And so starting off this new year with an eclipse and also this evolution of desire, this surrendering a bit to what is, feels like a big theme as I've contemplated this. He goes on to say that the gift of lightness does not make you immune to desire, but neither does it cause you to react to desire. It allows you to become your desires in all their mystery. This is a gift that knows desires do not necessarily have to be followed, but they do have to be felt. Sometimes they do have to be followed in order that something is learned, but generally what this gift knows is that fulfillment of desire is a sham. When human awareness penetrates down into the emotional system in this depth, then a huge sense of freedom emerges. This is the freedom of having a wide-angle view of desire. You know that whether or not you follow through with the desire, it will not lead to any lasting sense of peace. This means that desires no longer have such an addictive hold over you. In fact, desires become like guests you invite in for tea. They either leave in their own time or they stay and insist on being followed. In this sense, true lightness can be seen as the letting go of the need to escape desire itself. So again, clinging fire and desire. Don't put it out. Don't snuff out the fire because you don't want to have desires. But welcome them in for tea and know that they will leave on their own time. I listened to something the other day that was talking about how we cannot, it was talking about addiction and how we cannot quit something if we still find pleasure from it. And I thought this was really interesting because a lot of people say, oh, I'm quitting smoking, or I'm quitting drinking, or I'm quitting this person, for example. I'm going to spend less time with this person, but I really don't want to. It's so hard. I still really miss the thing that I'm quitting. And I think that what I've come to with that is that if you still feel a strong desire for something, but create a limit, try to snuff it out as you would with pouring water over a fire, that, the embers of the flame will still continue to rise up and they'll still continue. They can catch fire once again, almost in a more extreme way. The lecture I was listening to on YouTube was by a man named Robert Gilbert. And it was talking about how if we still find pleasure in something that we're trying to get out of our lives, it's not going to work. It's just going to creep back in. And so if you're really trying to quit something, or if you're really trying to change a habit, it's about associating pain or associating discomfort or non-pleasure with that thing rather than holding on to it in an exalted state and saying, I still find so much pleasure with this, but yet I'm still trying to get rid of it. Because again, that's just like not fully putting out a fire if you're still finding the desire in that fire. And so again, with this gene key, it reminded me of that because it's about putting a container of habits, a container of rituals. Fire finds a way to exist once it is lit. And so I think that that's something to think about this week as we experience this eclipse. The city level of the 30th gene key is known as rapture. And it is about being burned by the fires of bliss over and over again. It says that these are the people who are so flammable that the smallest thing will set them off, and whoever comes near them will very likely catch their devotional energy. The 30th city is about devotion to something larger than ourselves and how that they can spread that devotion in an auric way without even using words. Just feeling the heat and feeling the light of that fire that's emanating from someone who is truly devoted to what it is that they know inside their hearts. And so gate 30 in the human design body graph is located in the emotional solar plexus center. It's a motor center, and it's the center that is, according to the human design philosophy, it is a center that is mutating and evolving from a simple reactive motor center to a more responsive awareness center. Over the course of these years that we're in, we have a mutation happening in our emotional solar plexus. And so gate 30, this gate of clinging fire, this gate of passion, of desire, of feelings, is evolving from that reactive nature of wanting what we want and having these unbridled desires, and having a more zoomed out awareness of our desires so that we can work with them in a more wide angle type of way. And gate 30 is not meant to be acted on in the moment of feeling. The strategy with the solar plexus, if someone has emotional authority, meaning that their solar plexus is a predominant energy center in their body, that would mean that you wait for the emotional wave. Everyone who has emotional authority has waves of intelligence that come through emotions, but the emotions are not meant to be acted on immediately in the moment of having a feeling or having a desire. So the desire, the feeling is meant to be experienced and digested and clarified. And then over time, over the course of time, figuring out what that emotion or what that desire is trying to tell you. So it's, again, not instant truth. It's not feeling something and being like, I'm going to choose that horizon to run towards because I have this strong desire for this thing right now. It's recognizing that there will be emotional clarity about which direction to move after you've moved through the wave of feeling. Because emotions don't move in a linear fashion. They contain strong and powerful intelligence, but it's something that is moving through in a more embodied way. And so the emotional solar plexus is a center that teaches us that an intensity of a feeling is not necessarily the same as it being correct for you. So when gate 30 is lived in an unconscious way, it can feel really dramatic and overwhelming because the desire for something becomes the truth. But when we live consciously in the lightness of gate 30, there is this awareness that we will learn something from our desire, but it's not about achieving the desire necessarily. It's about paying attention to the subtleties of what that desire actually means and transcending the suffering of not having something, and kind of knowing that our feelings and our emotions can become informative rather than all consuming. And, I've heard so many times, feel your feelings. You got to feel your feelings. And for a while, when I first started hearing that, I was like, I don't want to feel my feelings. If feelings feel like suffering, they feel challenging. But as I started to do more practices that could hold my feelings, like breathwork practice that I do frequently, where I allow the energy of the emotions to have a place to land rather than just trying to push through my day when I'm feeling a feeling. When I lay with my emotions or breathe with my emotions or sit with them, I realize that emotions are simply energy in motion. And the more we can let them move, the more they will move outward and dissipate rather than concentrate as a wound or pain inside our bodies. And so during the course of this eclipse, and this Lunar New Year and this week ahead, if you're feeling overwhelmed by feelings, It's similarly like a fire, creating a hearth or creating a ring of stones around the emotions so they have a place to land and not stray and not spread and not consume more fuel, but just allow them to be. And eventually the fire will get to a point where it's a nice, warm, burning embers that is sustainable rather than, erratic flames that continue to burn so bright. So, just some thoughts about feelings. How are you all feeling out there? There's a lot of feelings circulating, and that is for sure. So, I've really been enjoying doing my breathwork sessions with the different zodiac signs, and I'll be continuing that through the upcoming year. So, if you'd like to create a practice or tune into a practice that's happening where we're breathing through these emotions, this energy and motion, you can sign up as a paid subscriber to my Substack at livingthespiral.com, and that will give you access to these breathwork sessions that I'm doing on a monthly basis that have been quite lovely and generative. So thank you to all of you who have been attending those and moving your emotions through, creating that beautiful hearth for your emotions to live. So yeah, that's gate 30. That's the kind of energy that we're working in. And with the alignment of the eclipse and with the fire horse, we have an assignment, and that assignment is really about tuning our emotional instrument, deciding how to feed our fires and not put them out, but what kind of fuel we want to give to our fires, and just ensuring that what we ignite doesn't just linger, but that knowing that when we do light something on fire, it can build momentum quickly. And so just knowing what it is that you are giving to the fire and what type of vessel to contain your fire within. So I will end here with a little bit about the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, but I'm going to do a separate episode about that that'll come out in a few days. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to look at the Saturn-Neptune conjunction of this year and also looking back to previous Saturn-Neptune conjunctions in 1989, 1953, 1917. We had these conjunctions happening. And I wanted to look into the specific gates that they came together in during those times to see how that manifested historically. So that'll be a separate episode. But for today, I just wanted to talk about the fact that this is happening right on the heels of the Lunar New Year of the Fire Horse, and right on the heels of this solar eclipse in Aquarius that it puts us right in the middle of eclipse season. So Saturn and Neptune can't be ignored. It's a big thing that's happening right in the aftermath of that. So we'll chat a little bit about it. Conjunction. Saturn is the planet of boundaries and structures and chronological time. And Neptune is Poseidon. Neptune is the god of the sea, the god of illusions and delusions and dreams and imagination. And so when those two come together in Aries at this first degree of the entire zodiac, they are creating a little bit of a conundrum. It's I think hard to conceptualize this meetup of these two very different planetary energies. And they're coming together in Gate 25, which is the Gate of Innocence or universal love. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. Gate 25 is the spring equinox gate. It's the gate that bridges Pisces to Aries. And I like to think of Gate 25 as the gate or the time of year when a sprout, a little dicot sprout that's come out of a seed and sent its roots down below, is finally peeking its leaves up above the surface of the earth. And I also think of it as like a baby lamb being born, or a baby chick hatching out of an egg. Spring equinox as the astrological new year, Aries being the beginning of that, is about new beginnings energy. And it's really that cusp between universal merged understanding of the late part of Pisces, which is when everything, comes together. It's like Pisces the we really surrender to death and recognize that we are all part of one thing, and that we don't have boundaries, we don't have individual selves, we are all part of universal oneness. And then right after that, um, what that universal life force that's contained within a seed, it hatches out and becomes an individual again. It goes from the universal egg, the universal seed, to an individual manifestation of that universality. And so there is a tension here in Gate 25, and having the Lord of Time and the Lord of the Sea meet in this gate is really potent, because it is taking universalized energy, where both Saturn and Neptune have been, and putting it into an individual expression. And so there's a tenderness to the place where this conjunction is happening, that is ultimately, it knows deep down in its cellular structure that universal love is truth, that there is this great wonder and great oneness to everything, and it's just been in that energy, and now it's coming into its individualized expression in Aries, and the little sprouts popping out above the earth, and it's cold, and there's snow falling perhaps, and there's bright sunlight after it's been underground for so long, and there's a certain degree of constriction that happens when the realization of the individual expression of universality has to come into form. And I think of any infant, this is infant energy. It's like there's this beauty of like, you're alive, you're in the world. And also, you think of what an infant does. A human infant, as soon as it's born, generally it cries. It lets out a wail that says, I'm alive and this is intense. This is like, I don't know what to do with this individual expression. Like, I've been fed by a tube in this beautiful, warm, watery place for so long. And now, boom, here I am. I have to breathe air, and I have to look at the sunlight, and it's a lot. It can cause our bodies to constrict, and that is the shadow level of Gate 25, is constriction. And the gift level of Gate 25 is acceptance. I think, if you can think of it as a progression, like you go through that, like, oh my God, I'm alive, kind of your full body, all of your cells just constrict. And then there's this awareness of, okay, once I can accept that I am a body, that I am a sprout, that I am a being in this new world, there's a certain beauty that can overwhelm your system. That's like, wow, it was nice inside the womb. It was nice under the sea. But now that I'm out in the beautiful spark of life, there's so much to see and so much potential. And so that kind of infinite potentiality is a big part of this energy that comes through. And the city of Gate 25 is universal love. And that is about connecting back into that kind of watery Piscean universalization of that awareness that, like, I can bring the love that I felt when I knew that everything was everything all at once everywhere. When I knew that deep in my bones, deep in my cells, even though I'm now an individual that has to go through my own pain, my own trials and tribulations, my own suffering, I can still bring that awareness of the universal love that I deeply knew up until very recently. Like, that can come with me into this next life. And so this gate is often known as the Gate of Innocence. And so in some ways, innocence can be described as naivete, as like, oh, well, you think this life is all about universal love? Well, let me show you. There's some true hardships that you're going to have to undergo. But innocence can also be a beautiful lens to see the world. That dilated pupils kind of energy that I was talking about earlier with the eclipse, where you have a new awareness of the truth, and that can have some harsh elements to it. But if you're bringing with you universal love that can be lived through your body and not just swum in or floated in, but actually lived through your actions. That's where that element of spiritual warriorship comes in that I was speaking to, that's about this cusp between death and new life, and how there's a deep understanding of truth and oneness in death. But once it comes into life, it takes more effort to bring that through. So that's where Saturn and Neptune are coming together, is right there in the gate of the ram, the gate of the sprout, the gate of the newborn baby. So it's a very potent place for these big outer planetary energies to converge. And I'd love you to join me in my next deep dive into that I'm excited about recording, as we look into the manifestations of how this conjunction has shown up over the past 100 years and how it's different this time around because it's starting this new cycle. So happy Lunar New Year, everyone. Happy Mardi Gras. Happy Ramadan. Happy new beginning time. Happy eclipse season. I don't know if happy is the right word for any of these, honestly, at this point, but loving devotional energy to you on these days as we really dive into gate 30, the gate of feelings and passion, gate 25, the gate of innocence and universal love. There is a lot of really powerful, beautiful energy surrounding our emotional solar plexus right now as that evolves to a center of awareness. I really love thinking about this being a time in history when our emotional awareness is going to get the credit that it's due. And we're going to listen to our emotions and not just try to push them down, but also not be overtaken by them. And that's the fine line that we're really working with in this week ahead and in the year ahead, is working with that solar plexus, working with our emotions in a patient way, doing some creative movement, some walking, some rocking, some floating, some swimming, some repetitive handiwork, things that really can bring that feeling of the horse's rhythm into our bodies so that we can stay in a good pace through the course of this year and not get, launched off the back of the horse and not get overcome by the flames of the fire. This is a year to attune to our desires and not be overcome by them. And that requires a different kind of work. So thanks for being here with me as we lean into this work and lean into our passions in a way that feels sustainable and nourishing. And if you'd like to dive deeper into how this energy of the Lunar New Year is going to affect your chart specifically, my books are open for readings, and you can find my different types of human design and astrology readings at hearthandspiral.com. And you can sign up for those breathwork sessions and bonus articles that I write and record throughout the course of the month at my Substack at livingthespiral.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Hearth and Spiral. And thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. Have a beautiful, beautiful beginning to the Lunar New Year, and feel those feelings, create space for those feelings. And I'll see you next time.